Hi everybody, Lars Fuchs here. Time for some more books by the fireside. As you can see, we're not by the fireside, but it is the middle of May, and it's just too hot for a fire in the fireplace. So I'm out here on my balcony in a comfortable rocking chair, and hopefully this will be just as good. I am very happy to report that one of my viewers has taken up the challenge of sending me something they've written. The author Marc Clark has sent me a book of his fairy tales, and I am going to be reading to you one of them today. This one is entitled Brooke Hester's The Princess Who Was Too Demanding by Marc Clark. Thank you, Marc. I really appreciate you sending me your work. And for the rest of you, I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I do. The Princess Who Was Too Demanding. Long before the people you know were born, before the books you've read were written, before the songs you've heard were sung, across oceans, into the mainland, through valleys, over mountains, beyond rivers and lakes, there were the green, rolling hills of the kingdom where this story takes place. Atop the highest hill stood the castle of this great land. Its delicate spires reached to the sky, golden and glistening in the sun. The city spread out beyond the castle like outstretched hands, taking its heart, its mind, its soul, and direction from the royal family within. The king was a wise warrior, and he chose for his wife a queen of such beauty and grace that his heart would race every time she entered the room. They loved one another so deeply that they feared having children, thinking it might take their attention away from each other. Like many parents before and after them, they found the opposite to be true. With their firstborn, their hearts grew to encompass the young prince who came forth. The same held true for each child after that. Their hearts grew and grew to love them one and all. The last child to be born to this loving royal family was a very special princess. Perhaps the powers that be saved the best for last because she possessed the strongest qualities of her parents, and it was clear the moment she took her first steps. They weren't tentative or wobbly. She put her foot down firmly and deliberately, one after the other, almost challenging everyone to get out of her way. The king and queen named her Ling Xiao, or Ling for short, which sort of means daughter of heaven, or one who rules part of the sky. It seemed as though Ling would one day rule any place she wished. Now, who's to say why children turn out the way they do? Some say we are who we are from birth, that the generations before us shaped everything about us, the color of our eyes and hair and skin, the shape of our nose, hips, toes, and chin, right down to our likes and dislikes, our tempers, our compassion, our intelligence, even what we remember and what we choose to forget. Others say that it's where we live and who raises us that define what kind of person we'll be, that we are blank pages and everything we come in contact with helps to write the story of us, an inspiring teacher, parents who constantly fight, a good friend, a bad neighborhood, harsh criticism, or a helping hand. Still others believe it's a mixture of both. You may have your father's temper and your Aunt Lay's eyebrows, but one good, steadfast person filled with compassion could change you into a kinder, more caring person. So I can't know for sure what made the princess the way she was. All I know is that she had to have her way about everything, and she usually got it. It's said that during the terrible twos, when children are 2 years old, kids want what they want and they want it now. Well, Ling didn't appear to outgrow her twos. At 2, if she didn't want to wear a dress that her handmaiden chose for her, she would cry and throw herself on the ground until she got her way. At 3, she would throw the dress on the floor and stomp on it. At 4, she would throw it out the window. At 5, she'd rip it to shreds. At 6, she would have the handmaiden who brought it to her removed. By the time Ling Xiao was 8 years old, all she had to do was give the handmaiden a cold stare, and the dress was never seen again. It's also said that you can get more flies with honey than vinegar. It was obvious that the princess hadn't heard that saying. She didn't politely ask a servant to bring her fresh vegetables with her meat. She'd say, "I don't care if you have to go out and plant the seeds, water them, and wait for them to grow. Just get me my fresh vegetables." You wouldn't hear her say, "Please, Professor, would you perhaps consider concentrating more on the subjects that might have a bit more impact on my life instead of spending so much time on battle strategies?" Oh no, it would be more like, "Forget war, treat me something useful, you oaf." So not the kindest princess you've ever met. You'd think that Ling Xiao's parents, the king and queen, would have recognized this unattractive trait in their daughter, but they did have 7 other children and a kingdom and a castle to run. Plus, it wasn't always apparent. In fact, this was one part of Ling's personality. She had many lovely qualities. Of course, you'll hear that a lot about someone who does things that are considered not nice. People will say, yes, but she has a really good heart. They mean that she's an awful person but isn't terrible 24 hours a day. She was actually a good person. Being demanding isn't necessarily a bad thing. It means that you fight for what you want. But when someone is too demanding and not so sweet about it, that is usually the only thing you remember about them. One of the really nice things about the princess was that she loved to dance, and when she did, she made everyone who watched forget that she had ever done anything wrong because they couldn't help but smile. She loved it so much that to her, it actually was love, the essence of love. So when she danced, she showered that gift on everyone. Ling also loved to listen to stories. Perhaps it was because the one thing she got to do alone with her father. He loved to tell his little girl stories, and she could listen for hours and hours about how her great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather banded together all of the villages and towns and established this magnificent kingdom centuries before. How a couple less great-grandfather formed trade routes with neighboring kingdoms to sell the iron ore so rich in their land, and built the great palace and city surrounding it. The heroics and devastation of the 10-year war with their neighbors to the north, or the romantic scandal of the dancing princess who chose a life in a dance troupe over a life in the palace. Ling thought she may have gotten her love of dance from her, if that's really how it works. What she really loved the best, though, were the stories her father told her about what the world was like before her ancestors built this kingdom, a time when deities walked the earth among the people. The tale she always wanted to hear was the one about the wooden box. She would snuggle up close to the king in her pillowed bed and ask, "Please, Father, tell me the story of the wooden box." And he would tell her a story something like this. Before time was recorded, when the deities protected humans as their flock, this land belonged to them. The hill where this castle now stands was filled with peach trees to feed mankind and lift their spirits and give them the gift of longevity. But the humans were weak and greedy and grew fat on the fruit until one by one the peach trees began to die out. At last, one tree remained standing, with only 7 peaches on its branches. Many of the deities wanted to punish the humans for their selfishness, but since they'd already lost the gift of a long life, the deity of hope convinced them to show mercy. She took the pits from the 7 peaches and placed them in separate wooden boxes carved from the trunk of the surviving tree. Each of the pits would allow a human one wish so as to give mankind the gift of hope. She then scattered the boxes to the 7 corners of the world, one of them being here on this very hill, hidden from the view of the greedy, but in plain sight of the pure at heart. To open the box, one merely had to whisper the words, "Great souls rely on their wills, weak ones have only wishes." Princess Ling Xiao could not stop thinking about that wooden box. She talked about it with her father, her mother, her sisters, her brothers, her teachers, her servants, and sometimes even herself, as we all sometimes do. She read everything she could get her hands on about it and even dreamt about it in her sleep. One morning she shot up in bed, coming out of another dream about the wooden box, and said out loud, "I'm going to find it." After all, what's the point of being demanding if you can't demand something magical? With the king's permission, she had word sent out to the far reaches of the land, even beyond their borders, that every small box be brought to the castle for her 13th birthday. If the bearer's box was chosen, they and their family would be allowed to live in the castle. Of course, the king, queen, princes, princesses, and much of the kingdom thought that Ling was being silly, but they were fascinated to see what would happen nonetheless. They weren't disappointed. It was a parade for the royal family and the city to behold, merchants and craftsmen from throughout the known world, held audience with the princess to present their beautiful boxes. Some so ornately crafted and bejeweled that their beauty would make the onlooker gasp and little girls' eyes light up. Wooden boxes inlaid with gold, silver, jade, and rubies. For months, the princess would invite the owners of the boxes into the throne room 100 at a time, open each of them and silently repeat the magic phrase to waken the spirit inside. But none responded. By the time Ling's birthday arrived, she had opened thousands of boxes without finding the wooden box of legend. Her father, the king, told her it was time to stop. She could pick the loveliest box as her birthday gift and as a reminder of how diligently she pursued her dream, which in itself is an accomplishment worth noting. Instead, the princess demanded that she be allowed to go and look at the boxes she hadn't seen yet that were still lined up outside the castle. She thought, and reasonably so, that the box containing the wishful spirit would be the most beautifully carved box ever seen. A box that, once glimpsed, would make you think, surely this box must have come from heaven. She had no doubt she would pick it out if she had just one more try. When she walked outside the castle doors, her little heart sank. The line of people holding boxes for her to see stretched for miles and miles. She would never be able to see them all, not in a day or even a week. She hated giving up, hated it. She lifted her face to heaven as a tear slipped from her eye and graced her cheek. Just then she heard a young girl's voice. "Your Highness," it said. The Princess turned to see a beggar girl about her age, kneeling at her feet. "Yes, speak," Ling Xiao demanded. "Do you think I have all day?" "It is my birthday today, same as you," the girl said. "I know it's not much, but my grandfather gave me this box today, and I know that it's too plain and ordinary for a princess, but—" "Yes," Ling urged her on. "What is it you're trying to say?" "Well, I offer it to you just the same, for your birthday," the girl said, holding up a faded wooden box, too large for her hands. Princess Ling looked at the ugly old box and the selfless little girl who offered it, then stared at the line stretched out before her, with thousands of people holding thousands of boxes. Her wish would never be granted now, that was a certainty. Her father did tell her to choose a box for her birthday, and she didn't want another young girl to be as disappointed as she was on this day. "It means all the more coming from a place of such kindness," Ling told the girl. "I accept your gift. Rise and tell me your name." Tears welled up in the young girl's eyes and spilled down her cheeks, etching white lines through the dirt on her face as they fell, dropping down and staining the already ragged wooden box. "My name is Yi, Princess," she said. Ling motioned for her to rise. She bowed to the beggar girl, accepting the box. The princess then took Yi's hand and led her through the gates, past the guards, to the castle garden. "Let's see if we can get you cleaned up a bit. You'll want to look your best if you're going to live in the castle with me." Yi gasped at the thought. "Your grandfather will join you, of course. Are there others in your family?" "Just him, Your Highness," Yi replied. The girl sat by the fountain in the shade of a tree. Ling dipped one of her embroidered handkerchiefs into the water and began to clean the dirt from her new friend's grubby face. There might actually be a pretty girl under here, Yi." Yi smiled and winced as the princess scrubbed and scrubbed, then dipped her legs and arms in the fountain to clear away most of the grime. After a time, the girl was as cleaned up as she could get without a hair wash and a change of clothing. Hers were practically rags. "That's better," the princess remarked, looking over the changed beggar girl. "You are lovely, Yi. I'm quite taken with you. Now, let's look at our gift." Then added, "I couldn't bring myself to actually take your birthday present away from you, so let's just share it, shall we?" Yi nodded yes. "I can't seem to open it. Where does it latch?" Ling said, almost to herself, struggling to pry it open. "It's a puzzle box of some kind, my grandfather told me. He wouldn't tell me the secret." Turning the box over and over, Ling noticed a small line, only noticeable because of the recent stains of Yi's happy tears. She mused, then dipped her handkerchief into the fountain once more and dripped water all over the ugly box. Immediately, dozens of crisscrossing lines appeared on the surface. Both girls gasped together and looked at each other with wide-open eyes. "It's an adventure," the princess exclaimed. "Come." With that, she grabbed Yi's hand and they ran to a place within the garden walls under the shade of a beautiful tree. They lay on the soft, fresh grass, playing and laughing together, moving and sliding the different pieces of the puzzle box to try to get it open. After hours, the task became frustrating, and the princess grew annoyed. She finally yelled out, "I wish this cursed box would open." The words were barely past her lips when she stopped moving altogether. She stared at Yi for so long it made the young girl nervous. "What is it, Your Highness?" Ling didn't answer. She stood up and looked towards the gate of the garden leading to the city's plaza and the long line of people with boxes still standing, then to the ground, then slowly up the roots, trunk, branches, and fruit of the tree they were sitting under. Then she saw Peach gently swaying in the breeze. "Your Highness?" Yi inquired. Still in silence, the princess knelt down in the grass and gently lifted the box once more. She held it close to her lips and whispered, "Great souls rely on their wills. Weak ones have only wishes." Immediately, the pieces of wood that composed the box began moving on their own. The girls' eyes and mouths opened in amazement. The pieces of wood fell away one by one, finally exposing a beautiful peach wood box with the most intricate carving of a peach tree on its lid. With Yi looking on, Princess Ling Xiao slowly opened the box to expose a perfect peach pit within. The girls looked at each other wide-eyed with smiles transforming their faces. Yi swallowed, trying to find her voice. "What do we wish for?" Li was way ahead of her. She was already nodding. "I know. May I?" "It is your present, Princess," Yi told her. "You do with it as you wish." "It will be for the both of us," Ling said as she clasped Yi's little hand in her own and closed her eyes. We wish to dance on air." Before the words were finished, the girls were lifted off the ground. They both shrieked with excitement. Ling took hold of Yi's hand and waist and spun her around. Yi threw her head back and laughed and laughed. "Higher," Ling demanded, and up they rose above the tree. They shrieked again, looking down at the ground below, frightened but excited, spinning and twirling and laughing out loud. "Higher, higher, higher," the princess demanded. The dancing girls spun their way up and up until the castle and city below looked like toys. If you've never felt the happiness of dancing without a care, you cannot know the sheer joy that Princess Ling Xiao experienced that day. Not only could she float across the floor as she did on Earth, but this floor had no hard surface to land on, nor walls to contain her, nor ceiling to limit how high she could leap. She could spin until she was dizzy, dive into a cushion of air, or jump upwards towards the sun. It was magnificent. "Higher," Ling demanded. Yi's heart was in her throat as the girls rose so high they could almost touch the clouds. "Please, Princess, this is high enough," Yi said, growing fearful. Maybe Ling had never heard the tale about flying too high and falling because of wings made of feathers and wax. Or maybe the story wasn't told in her part of the world. Or perhaps she just didn't care about anything except getting more and more of this glorious feeling. "Higher," she demanded in spite of Yi's warning, and up they went above the clouds. No one had flown before, so no one could have known what happens when you reach that height, and therefore no one could have warned the princess that the air is too thin to breathe so far above the earth. Your head goes dizzy, your brain confuses, and without the air you need, you faint away. That's what happened to the girls. They fainted, and they began to fall. The fall was so far that after a few moments, Yi started coming to her senses. She saw what was happening and screamed. She shook the princess to wake her. Ling opened her eyes, but was so groggy she couldn't focus. It seemed like a dream to her. "You must wake up, Your Highness. We will die," Yi yelled to her, but Ling did not respond. She watched Yi as if in a dream, below her with the earth far away but growing closer, faster and faster. She frowned as the young girl grabbed hold of the sides of her flowing gown, bunching the material together. As the princess watched in her dreamlike state, she thought, "Look at her working to save us both. Poor people must be so much smarter about survival than I am. When they're faced with death, they don't lose their heads. Maybe it's because they face danger and starvation almost daily. What brave souls they are." After several moments, Yi had created a sort of parachute out of Princess Ling's massive dress, although no one had ever heard of one back then. Suddenly it caught the air and they floated down, not speeding towards their certain death. This is much nicer, the princess thought. Then she hit the ground, banged her head, and everything became dark. When Ling opened her eyes, she was staring at the blue sky. "It's so pretty," she said to no one. "I should look at it more often." When she sat up, she was still in the garden next to the peach tree. The wooden box was by her side, fully restored to its original, plain, ugly form. Yi was nowhere to be seen. Where had she gone? Ling ran to the entrance of the garden to ask the guards if they had seen the young lady who had been with her. "We saw no one with you as you entered, Your Highness," one guard replied. "The little beggar girl who's been with me all afternoon," the princess said. The other guard agreed with the first. "You have been alone all afternoon, princess. No one else entered or left." "That's impossible," Ling told them. "Find the beggar girl now. Her name is Yi." "Yes, Your Highness," they responded, as one ran into the garden and the other into the streets to search. Ling Xiao's head was reeling. Where did she go? What happened? She still felt a bit dizzy, so she retired to her bedroom and slept through till morning. When she woke, she couldn't remember if the whole thing had been a dream or not, yet there was the ugly wooden box by her side. She checked with the guards and was told that Yi was nowhere to be found. Ling took guards with her and searched the city looking for her friend. They looked everywhere and asked everyone if they had seen her. As the afternoon light was fading, an old man said he knew of such a girl and pointed them to the marketplace. The princess was so excited when she saw the young beggar girl. "Oh, Yi, I've been looking everywhere for you," she said as the girl turned and looked at her. The girl did have a face very much like Yi's, but alas, it wasn't her. You'd think that Ling would be heartbroken, but somehow she wasn't. Somehow, finding even a trace of her friend in the stranger's face made her happy. It brought a smile to her face, and she reached out and held the girl's hand. The princess decided then and there to befriend this beggar girl, and she brought the girl and her family to the castle to live with her. The next day, Ling went out again to search for Yi, this time with the little beggar girl by her side. As they passed the garden, the girl said, "Oh, peaches, may I have one?" "Of course," the princess said. "We will fill a basket." They gathered up all the peaches they could carry and traveled the city with the guards. Each time they came across a beggar girl, they gave her a peach and coins to feed and clothe her and pay for a decent place to live. For months, Ling and the beggar girl searched throughout the city and the surrounding villages, but there was no word, no trace of Yi. They came upon many poor beggar girls and gave them each a peach and money from the royal coffers. In time, they did the same for every unfortunate person they met, girls and boys, young and old. The king brought his daughter before him and told her that she was spending far too much money and that she must stop. Ling knelt before the king and said to him simply, "Your Majesty, I know it isn't right to disobey you, but if I must, I will sell all that I have to continue this work. Father, I can't. I won't stop." The king reached down and took his daughter's delicate face in his hand. He couldn't decide if he was more proud of her for her determination or for her giving heart. "Of course, my daughter," he said. "You must continue." In this way, Princess Ling Xiao became the fulfillment of the legend of the wooden box, for she represented hope to the poor people of her kingdom. The end. Thank you, Mark. It was really an honor to be allowed to read your work. I hope everybody enjoyed it. So thank you very much for listening. Till next time. As always, if you enjoyed it, please let me know in the comments. And if you have any thoughts, please share those as well. And especially if you did enjoy it, please feel free to share this with anyone who you think might also enjoy it. And if you have work you'd like me to read, just like Mark, please send it. Bye now.